welcome to the world of LearnX. Today we're stepping inside best practice and I'm joined by Molly. Molly, tell us about what you do. Tell us what inspired you to start what you're doing.
So I am Molly. I am a registered veterinary nurse. I decided to go into locuming 6 months out of, graduating. And it was probably one of the best but worst things I ever did. Best because it led me to what I do today, which is Management For Locums, but worst because it led to so many other issues that I didn't realise practices had, the industry had as a whole, which I never really knew I was going to go down this path. I qualified in 2017. I have a huge passion for emergency and critical care, so I did my emergency and critical care certificate. I thought I was going to live in referrals for the rest of my life, and then just due to family and the difference in location, I thought, I'll locum for a bit because I saw somebody else do it and thought it looked all right. And it sort of immediately I realised how broken systems were, how isolating it was, and how sort of there was poor communication, no support, chaotic, messy. So I decided to build a community of locums to see if anyone else had the same issues, which they did. And 2 years ago, we decided to also create a platform for practices so that we can seamlessly book and communicate and create a better locum sector within the veterinary industry.
Amazing. So you mentioned you saw things were a little bit broken. Could you try and highlight some of the chaos, some of the confusion, some of the places in which things were broken?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing was that there was literally no regulation, no support for me to become a locum. So as I said, the place that I was working at when I qualified, there was a locum that was in at that time, and I was saying, okay, what do I need to do? And I was thinking it was, I had to get accredited or I had to do something, and they were like, nope, you literally just message a practice and see if they need some help. And at the time I thought, great, that's really simple, and I can now go into this whole business owner situation where I'm a locum and I control my hours and control my rates and all these sorts of fancy things. But it was a very stressful time because going into a different practice, the industry has the ability to everyone to be very unique in the way that each practice is made and run. And I think that's a fabulous thing. But from a locum perspective, you need to understand different practice policies, different team dynamics, different ways of working, different experiences, different techniques. So when you've come from 6 months out and you think that you're the bee's knees, which I did because I worked at a 24-hour hospital and I thought I knew everything, it was a very, very stark realization. But there was no one else to turn to. There was no one to say, okay, well, I've made these mistakes, or I don't know how to invoice, or this policy is in this practice and I don't agree with it. What do I do? Those sorts of incompatibility areas, there was nowhere to turn, there was no communication, and that then leads to a domino effect of people not liking locums because they're not compatible, they cause more issues, they get stressed, locums get stressed, everyone blames each other, where actually the system was the real problem.
That's a really concise answer, and I think you've highlighted a number of things that I've been aware of and a number of things I really would never have thought of beneath the surface. Now, recruitment is a huge challenge for people in the veterinary world. What do you think are some of the combinations that lead to this kind of pressure cooker effect that so many practices are struggling to find the right clinical team members?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that are new. I like the pressure cooker sort of analogy, but there are a few things that are new. I think workload intensity is new. We due to factors that have come in, pet demand. Demand has risen faster than, I guess, staffing capacity. And clinicians, veterinary professionals, they're sort of no longer willing to burn themselves out for professional duty, which I guess was the traditional vet culture a little, way back when, especially when I was training and stuff, that was expected. We work long hours, we're here, you wanted to get that burnout badge kind of thing. And that's hugely changed, and sort of new in regards to retention and recruitment is how you then treat your veterinary professionals and your permanent staff. I think what's been ignored in the last 20 years is the workforce planning. So I think we're still very reactive rather than proactive when it comes to recruitment and retention. If that problem comes up, we'll then deal with it rather than trying to put in boundaries and systems that prevent that happening. And retention was never really treated as seriously as recruitment. And I still think that is a little bit of the case, because I guess when it comes, there are people that are still short-staffed. There are practices that are still short-staffed. So we're trying to get on top of the whole recruitment before we think about retention. But if you do it the flip way, you keep the staff and we stop that domino effect. So I think that also implicates in the sort of, the pressure cooker that you talk about. I think something else that I've learned recently as well is the emotional load of clinical work that is left underestimated. I have been one of those veterinary professionals that have just dealt with it, have just sort of brushed things under the carpet. That was sad. I'll, get over it later. And, it's just the job and blah, blah, blah. But really, that emotional clinical work is the reason that people start to leave when it's not dealt with at that time. And if you deal with it on a daily or weekly or monthly basis, and we are checking in and we are, again, within that retention aspect, although it might not seem in that time to be important, or you might think, oh, okay, yeah, we've done a huddle and, that's fine. And yeah, we've broken it down and I don't feel any different. But it's because you're dealing with things as they come rather than letting them build up. And then you suddenly feel, oh, actually, I have taken on quite an emotional toll. So I think when you're doing something in the time, it doesn't feel like it. A bit like entrepreneurship, I guess, until it builds up and then you go, yeah, this was a bit too much and maybe I should have done something sooner.
Absolutely. There's some really good points raised there. Now, this, I guess, will do you out of a job in some respects if people fix all the problems. But what are some things that practices should be doing practically? You've mentioned regular check-ins and making sure things don't build up. But what are some practical things that team leaders should be doing to ensure they have better retention with their staff?
Yeah, I mean, you say do me out of a job, but I strongly believe that even if we were a fully staffed industry, locums would still be needed, because in order to allow for team morale and to prevent this recruitment gap and issue that we're in, for example, for burnout, is being able to support your team members. So support them when they go on holiday, not just put that extra pressure on your team with one person down. That's when a locum can step in and support your team in that aspect. So even if we were a fully staffed industry, there would still be on average 143,000 shifts that would need covering every single year, just from sickness, holiday, general staff cover. So that's really where we should be as an industry. Whether we ever get there or not is a different story, because we are obviously in a staffing crisis, and that staffing crisis is where people need to, I guess, have a think in regards to what they can be doing and what they shouldn't be doing. I think many practice owners, and you could sit here and list all check-ins and human factors and different CPDs and supporting your staff in lots of different ways, but actually it's down to that individual practice and how that individual team dynamic works, which is why we talk about compatibility with locums, because not every locum will fit every practice, and that's where this divide of whether locums are needed or not, or whether I want them or not in my practice, comes from, because people will decide, I'm going to deal with my practice this way and that's how my team prefer it, and other people will deal with it in other ways. So I think it's actually quite hard to give a list of, retention, why don't you do this and everything will get better, because it is so individual to each practice.
Totally understood. I know there's a tendency to try and simplify everything, but many challenges within all industries and within veterinary, they're complex questions that require a lot of thinking. There's layers to them. Now, when it comes to locums are very much loved and sometimes loathed. There can be very divided opinions, as you've already alluded to, around locums. What are some of the contributing factors to these differences of opinions?
Yeah, I mean, how long have we got? I think so locums divide opinion because people put it on the locum themselves. When we talk about locums, we're talking about veterinary professionals, we're talking about human beings. But actually, it's not the locum themselves that are dividing these opinions. It's the system around the locum sector that divides the opinion. It's just people, the locum standing right in front of them, so it's very easy to blame someone that's there. And locums trigger very strong opposing emotions. You know, you get people that, like I said, will refuse to use locums. They've been burnt one too many times. And you've got people that absolutely adore their locums. And I think it's a variety of things. So I think the first thing is that locums expose the real health of a practice, and that can make people feel really uncomfortable. You know, and I mean that by, if you've got a very well-run practice, locums come in and they offer relief and breathing space and stability, and your team will feel supported, not threatened. But if you have a struggling practice, one that maybe doesn't have the right systems in place, they don't have the ability to do either an in-person induction, or at MFL we create what we call pre-arrival checklists. If we don't have that thing and you're just creating a Facebook SOS post and bringing a body in, that in itself is just putting someone as another moving part into an already quite fragile system. So when stress gets high and workload gets high and teams aren't being able to merge and work together as well, that stress instantly gets projected onto the locum. And the reason being is it's human psychology. Outsiders can carry the blame. You know, we look at it, well, if I blame my team member, I've got to now work with them, you know, for the rest of however long I'm here at this practice. If I can blame the locum, they'll be gone, they're temporary, they're an outsider. So there's a bit of human psychology to it when we are feeling stressed, to just put the blame on something that's easy to put the blame on. And again, we've got to remember that a locum is a human being, so we are putting that on another human being. I think dependence as well can also be quite an uncomfortable feeling. So a practice having to depend on locums, so again in recruitment gaps and things, you know, they might not want to admit that they need a locum maybe just to stay open. So, you know, they've had a long-term sickness, they're a small clinic or they're a new clinic growing, and they literally need someone to come in to stay open. I've recently had a new practice come to me, and their vet nurse was unable to work for the first month of them opening, and they literally needed a locum to work to open their doors. So it can be quite uncomfortable, and to depend on someone that you've just met to literally open something that you've been working so hard for, and also to deliver safe care. So, you know, relying on somebody that maybe you don't know, SOS Facebook posts, like I said, to come in and deliver that safe care and talk to your clients. And if they do, or if they don't, it can trigger sort of loss of control, and then again, frustration around that system. So it's very easy to then just say that locum was rubbish, it was their fault, not the system that was actually in place and how I found that locum in the first place. Obviously, a huge trigger is money. Money is a huge thing around locums, and, you know, the different costs and understanding the different costs and why locums charge more, why practices should be able to budget. And again, the frustration that if a practice hasn't been able to budget for locums, or they haven't put that into their annual sort of budgeting for 2026, it then becomes an expensive cash flow month on month when you need them. That instantly relates back to that individual locum, because it's that, you know, you're transferring that money to them. That feeling, that loss of control, like I said, and money and resentment, I guess, of spending that money when you didn't want to or you didn't budget for, will lead back to that locum, rather than the system that was in place that you didn't budget for it. So if you did have the money there, would you feel the same about giving it to that locum? Probably not. And then finally, I guess they disrupt what's normal. So that illusion of what's normal, having a permanent member of staff, having a team, you know, coming into work every day, they change that. They challenge the old identity. They challenge the old veterinary culture of, you know, they bring in boundaries, they have their own hours, you know. It's not a case of that practice can make them self-sacrifice or stay no matter the cost, or, you know, all these different things that maybe the traditional old vet culture did bring. And when I was younger and when I was starting out, all I wanted to do was veterinary nursing, and I spent hours and hours and hours, but it's because I loved it. It wasn't, I didn't go in on a Sunday to do, help out with the GDV because I was forced to. It's because I wanted to learn. It's because I loved it. So there was a difference. That was my boundary then, but now my boundary is different now. And it's respecting those. And I think that locums can challenge that because they are in control. They have a choice. They have their own boundaries. So it's lots of different things, I guess, that reflect into why practices either love or loathe locums. But really, it all comes down to the system and how you found your locums to begin with.
That's a very comprehensive answer, Molly. Almost a thesis on locums. And
can you tell I've done it before?
I guess you've probably done it once or twice before. Now, it is easy to make the outsider a scapegoat. You've highlighted a few interesting psychological points. Do you think there might be some kind of resentment towards locums, that vets know how much some of the locums might be making each day, and they're thinking, well, I'm only making this much today and you're making several times more than I am? Do you think that can set in terms of people not really welcoming them as much as they should do into the team?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think the phrase "money is the root of all evil" doesn't come from nowhere. It's a huge factor, and I think especially when they come in and they're not part of their team. So, like at MFL, for example, we work with practices building their own locum bank. So the team will continuously work with anywhere between 20 to 50, depending on the size of the practice. But they'll always kind of see the same locums moving through. And if you just have someone come in who doesn't understand your practice policies, are making mistakes, not on purpose, but again, not understanding your systems, or are asking you to do that estimate because they don't know how to do the estimate, asking you to book up because they don't know how to book up, it becomes a resentment because they're not coming in seamlessly and helping you. They're just adding to your workload and then taking what people think is more money. And essentially, if you put the two, costs side by side, it looks like it. But there needs to be more education around what goes into a locum cost. There are benefits to being a permanent member of staff, CPD, holiday, sick leave, maternity, those sorts of things. And the scarcity and responsibility and risk that comes with being a locum. Yes, we can set our own hours, but we have to go and find those hours. And locums boomed ever since COVID, so the demand and the availability of shifts is lower. So you need to now be more competitive with your rates and what you can offer. And that's something that locums really haven't faced before. But at the end of the day, it's business. But if you understand that, then you sort of keep on succeeding as a locum. If you think you can just step in, think you can make lots of money, not do a lot in regards to that policy and practice and the team dynamic, you're going to quickly find out that locuming isn't for you. So yes, there is resentment, but I think once people understand what goes into a locum's cost, people then start to go, oh, okay, actually we're pretty similar.
So what are some of the unseen values that locums bring into practices? Obviously filling a gap, making sure that the provision is there, but what are some of the other advantages that people might not think about when it comes to the value of having locums come into your practice regularly?
Having a locum come into practice is incredible for all sides of that practice, whether it's the client, whether it's the team, whether it's the actual practice themselves, the owners, and also the profession. Because to start with, having someone come in from different policies, worked at different teams, worked with different experiences and learnt different things, they can come into that practice and offer a space to evolve. So perfect example, obviously I actually still do locum vet nurse shifts because I enjoy it. I want to keep up with my clinical standard. But I've worked in referrals, I've worked in different places, and I helped one practice completely redo their isolation and their isolation protocols because of what I've seen in other aspects and the space that they had. There was things that I thought and I knew about and I've seen that worked well that they hadn't because they hadn't stepped out and worked in other places. So the ability to evolve beyond sort of the outdated career model of you work at this place, then you work at this place, and you might stay at that place for the rest of your life. Bringing in different experiences and techniques can really help the practice themselves. Obviously, the team, the relief that they can offer a team in staffing pressure or just caseload pressure is huge. Again, as long as that system is in place to bring in someone that can match with that team dynamic, that skill set, and sort of seamlessly understand the practice protocols, the PMS system, for example. So that's really important. The practice, obviously, the flexibility as well, to have someone who is a locum that can come in on busy periods or a gap, or not having to have someone on that payroll. So there's lots of times where a practice may be growing. They're not at that stage yet to bring in another member of staff and take on that extra payroll, but they still need someone in between. That's when a locum is absolutely brilliant. You're not stuck into a contract or anything. You can literally just use them as you need them. And then obviously clients and patient welfare. If we don't have the ability to do the consult and see the people we need to see and the patients that we need to see, or we're putting that on staff that we already have and asking them to do extra consults, the extra walk-ins, also surgery. We've got another surgery coming in, then we've got an emergency. One of those clients and one of those patients is not going to have the welfare and support and client care that they would if you had a locum coming in to support you. So the clients can also benefit, which again will benefit the practice, and again that domino effect of team, practice, locum, client.
So when it comes to your approach with Management for Locums, it's not just about filling rota gaps. What's different about your approach, Molly? How do you try to balance fairness, sustainability, and ultimately sanity on both sides?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to know that MFL wasn't built just, okay, I can see that there's a problem with shifts, and I'm going to create a platform and I'm going to still charge as a recruitment agency would per shift and just put people together like a Tinder. MFL was created as a community first and foremost. We created something to support people with resources, to support people with understanding what it means to be a locum, veterinary professionals, whether locuming was even right for them. Just because they wanted freedom and flexible working, that has boomed even with retention and permanent staff. Have they spoken to their practice managers? Do they understand how to speak to their practice manager before then quitting and deciding to locum because you think that's your only option? So we started first and foremost as a support network and a community, and then we've built MFL through that. So we've built it off of pain points that both locums and veterinary practices feel and how they actually want to work together. Yes, there is the ability of an end-to-end workflow. You can create your shifts. We've built that workflow into, workforce infrastructure. We don't sell shifts. We don't just go and find yourself a locum. That's the whole point of why MFL was built, is that we want to understand your practice, your preferences, your needs, your skills, your team, and then find locums who understand that first. And then when you need support, you go from that pool of locums rather than the whole UK, because that's where incompatibility can come from. I think it's really important that there is fairness from both sides. I think as a locum myself, yes, locums have got the hard hit from just in general industry. People say locum and they give their opinion about it. But on the flip side of that, I think practices can sometimes get a hard hit when they're negotiating on price. People need to understand that a practice is a business too. They have budgets, they have needs. They might have a different way of working. Again, one of our clients is just feline, has, half-hour consults. That's going to be a different rate and a lower rate than if you were doing 15-minute consults, because you literally cannot see the same amount of animals within that time period. But the benefits of that is that you're not in a rush. You have, you might absolutely just adore cats. There's different aspects to it. Longer lunches, might be around the corner, might be further away. They'll offer accommodation, all these sorts of things. So instead of having the admin of all of these different aspects that are very, very important, but if I put them all in a long list, would take you 2 weeks just to find one locum, which is completely unreasonable and inefficient, we create it on a seamless automatic workflow. Very transparent on your rates and contracts and expectations, very compliant. No one is on there without compliance in right to work, identity, RCVS, CV, insurance, all of those sorts of things. And I guess the real importance is the ability to chat, because we can list everything, but you really just want to know the person. So being able to chat to people before you even have them in as a shift, whether they fit, whether you can understand who they are and what they need and what you need and how they react to different scenarios, will allow you to create that list much, much better of your locums that you can then rely on. So it's very much being proactive rather than reactive to reduce that chaos and stress and financial leakage that very much happens when you do your SOS. I just need somebody.
Things look set to change in the veterinary world. There's lots of things happening: societal change, global change, AI, technology, the CMAs. What kind of things might change when it comes to the work and role of locums in the future?
Locums are evolving all the time. And I think the locum sector is evolving a lot as well. If we look into sort of near markets like healthcare, or even in different countries, America, for example, these systems like MFL are quite saturated. There are lots of them around. So I think the UK veterinary market is coming into the idea that a system for your locum sector is needed. Now, when these things come in, locums themselves, veterinary professionals themselves also have to evolve. And locum work, ever since sort of Brexit and COVID and the want and need for flexible working, locum work has become sort of more of a mainstream career pathway. It's no longer thinking, okay, well, I'll do this for a couple of months and I'll go back to a permanent job. People are now doing it longer term as their mainstream career. With that, you need to ensure that as a locum, you're also a business owner, so you're also understanding the other aspects that come around as being a locum. So, whether you're doing it sole trader, whether you're doing it limited company, whether you're doing it through an umbrella, all these sorts of things matter as you evolve as a locum, understanding regulations and working with practices. And also building your portfolio. So CVs used to be, I've worked here, I've worked here, I've worked here. Now CVs for locums become a portfolio of, I've done this at this practice, I've helped this with this practice. Like I said, I created an isolation, protocol and system and place within a practice. That's something that maybe you wouldn't put on a CV normally, but as a locum you do. You're creating a portfolio of your career that sort of dominates over linear CVs of people that have just been sort of permanent members of staff. So you're becoming two different areas and two different types of veterinary professionals that you can choose from now as a practice manager. And then, practices will have to integrate locums into their strategic workforce planning because flexible working is coming in, even with their veterinary teams. People are wanting different hours. You're going to have to fill those hours, whether you fill that successfully within your own team or you need a backup, a support network, and that can be your locum bank. And that's what I mean. It's not just a random locum coming in. It's your bank. It's your second team, and it's pulling from them to ensure that you have a strategic workflow. And I guess finally, with locums evolving, technology also then has to evolve. Will technology replace our current system of using recruitment agencies or direct ways on social medias and stuff? I don't know whether they will completely remove it, and I don't think it would be a good idea to completely remove it. I think the ability to have flexibility with how you find people is up to you. But I think from an actual admin and streamline, there has to be a system in place for finding locums to prevent your practice, sort of back end side of your practice, your organisational sort of backbone, I guess, failing. And that happens over and over and over again when you are just emailing people, miscommunication, all sorts of things can happen. So tech is coming in, tech is being used in all sorts of things, even outside of locuming. There's huge things about AI and all of that sort of stuff. But will it replace everything that we do? I don't think so. I think it's always good to have a human factor. I think things can work in parallel, but systems must change.
So as a final question, Molly, we like to have a little bit of fun thinking about the contrast between best practice and worst practice. So let's focus on worst practice here. What are the things that practices might be doing unintentionally or maybe even intentionally to make things hard to work well with locums? What are some of the dysfunctions that you see within the sector when it comes to working with people coming in as locums?
Yes, best practice, worst practice. I'm not going to name names, but I have seen over and over again, I think, I think with people that run practices with the thoughts of locums in mind from day dot. So I've worked with many people that have been opening their doors and they already are thinking about locums through growth or, you know, just their workforce, understanding at some point we will need a locum. Having that mindset is the best way to run your practice, whether you have already run it and you're successful and now you're thinking about your workflow your next 6 to 12 months ahead, or you're just starting out and opening your doors. The 6 to 12 months ahead of your workforce should be planned. And you probably do this with lots of different, your medication, your own staff, the equipment that you're using. Practices already have a plan. They just need to implement locums into that plan. They need to treat locums as part of their clinical team when they are there. They are not separate. If you treat them as separate, they work separate and things do not merge well. If you are seamless and you have allowed them the information and ability to come in and work seamlessly, then you should treat them as that when you are there. Communication is absolutely massive because locums have to adapt to different practice policies and different ways of working. If that practice is upfront with how they are doing things, that locum can adapt and come in much easier, much clearer, much earlier as well. Respecting boundaries and contracts. Respecting contracts. If you have written something down, you have to go with it. And respecting the boundaries that people have. If you don't agree with them, if you have issues or it doesn't fit within your practice, that's an incompatibility thing. That's not that locum is being unreasonable with their boundaries. It's for whatever reason, we need this. You sit here, that is fine, we understand, but we need this, so we find someone who can fit that. It's not, like I said, that blame culture and pressure culture of trying to merge people into how you work. And obviously we said it at the start, but I think the best run practices invest in their retention rather than their recruitment. If we can get you back up to fully staffed and we're supporting with locums rather than using locums in a recruitment gap, you will find a much, much seamless practice process and just day-to-day workflow and life. It will be much, much, much easier. So I guess the opposite to that, and what I have seen, unfortunately, regularly, and it's not worst run practices as in like from a client point of view or patient point of view, or the team might absolutely love it. It's just, if you look from an outside point of view, or like a human factors kind of point of view as well, it's treating locums as commodities, disposable labour. That locum is a veterinary professional, that locum is a human being. You've asked for them to come in, then treating them in a different way is never going to be, you're just going to have a clash. Changing terms last minute. So this sometimes happens just not in a malicious way. It's just they don't understand, like some practices have never had to create a locum contract. So they don't know what's supposed to be in a locum contract. They don't know until things start to happen what needs to be in that contract. So again, that's why we built MFL Offer Community and Resources first. So we create really good, strong structures before you then start using locums and creating your bank. So changing terms last minute can always just create issues and problems. Let's just say problems with with using locums. And then I guess underestimating the true cost of burnout. So, you know, like we were talking about boundaries and why people don't like locums and they've been burnt by locums, and it's the incompatibility. It's just finding someone to fit a gap, to, you know, do some consults and hope that they'll, you know, do them successfully. Hope and lack of proactive understanding is what stops locums and practices working together so seamlessly. So if you're a practice that just keeps going on, I'll just find someone, I'll just find someone, I'll just find someone, that someone is not going to be compatible. If you find your unicorn that happens to be really great, and then you keep them, and that's great, but that doesn't happen all the time. So, it's ones that don't have the systems in place, and plug it using MFL to ensure that you are the best run practice.
Molly, thank you so much for joining. This has been really insightful. I've really enjoyed our time speaking together. So thank you everyone for joining, watching and listening. Please head over to the LearnX platform. You can get your certificate of attendance for the Best Practice Summit by engaging with the reflection questions we have there. There's some more information about MFL, and you can connect with Molly through there as well. Thanks again for joining, Molly. Have a great rest of the day.